Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. This 305th episode of the podcast is another trip back into the Cast1 box of podcast content. And what is that? Well, this is a series that's set within the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast universe of kind of introductory information. But it has value beyond the brand new fly fisher. Certainly, if you're new to angling or you know someone new to angling, send this their way because this has got some very important but also helpful information. But this is also a podcast series that is really geared towards those who are fishing with others who may want to be able to pass on knowledge in a way that is helpful to somebody. So we all know how to fly fish if we have been doing it for any length of time, but we might not necessarily have the tools to be able to communicate that to other people. And so that's one of the things that I really want to give to you, the experienced angler, if you are listening to this podcast. And you very well may pick up something new. And you very well may say, hey, you left something out. And I'm always interested in hearing that. I anticipate that this podcast, talking about releasing fish well, will certainly garner a couple of pieces of feedback that I'll be able to circle back to in an upcoming episode and offer up either correction or amendation or something like that. But we're talking about releasing fish, which is an underappreciated part of the process. When you look at the wealth of literature that's available to you about getting to the water, getting the things you need, making the cast, getting the fly in front of the fish, and even fighting the fish, which I guess is also probably something that doesn't get talked about too much. For all of the information that goes into those things, making sure that you get that fish back in the water and it swims away again is something that doesn't get as much attention. Now, certainly over the last maybe 15, 20 years, there has been big emphases placed upon keeping fish wet, getting fish back in the water quickly, things like that. Well, today I want to talk about those things, not in super scientific detail, but just remind people of what goes into that. But really what this boils down to is catch and release. Why do we do catch and release? What's the whole point? Now, catch and release is important. In fact, my license plate, my first car I drove, had a license plate that was C and R. C and then ampersand. The Commonwealth of Virginia let you put an ampersand in your license plate. A customized brook trout plate that said C and R. And I think catch and release is very important, particularly like where I was fishing in Virginia. I was fishing the Shenandoah National Park. I was fishing the Pennsylvania Spring Creeks. These are wild trout fisheries that receive a lot of pressure. So if everybody just kept one or two fish, it would still be very detrimental to the river system. So that's why catch and release matters so much. But if you're going to release a fish, then you want to make sure that you release it and give it a great opportunity to survive. Because just because you throw a fish back does not guarantee that it's going to survive. Now, let me throw a few caveats in there. The first one, just because you release a fish well does not mean it is going to survive. You may employ everything I talk about in this episode. You may go above and beyond and exercise an extreme amount of caution, and there is still going to be fish mortality. It's going to be significantly reduced. It's going to be mitigated because of those steps that you take, but there is no way to eliminate fish mortality in fishing. All right? No matter what you do, no matter how you do it, you are going to run into some dead fish. And that's just the nature of it. So if you truly are so concerned about the welfare and well-being of the fish, then stay out of the water, all right? Now, that might sound harsh, but I think we can all realize that this is an acceptable thing to do, to go out and fish and take care of the resource. And actually, by being there and being invested in the resource and being present, there are significant protections that are being offered to the fish and the ecosystem. So that's the first caveat, right? That some fish are going to die. Secondly, you don't have to practice catch and release. Now, if it is a stream that has regulations that mandate catch and release, then you need to practice catch and release. If it is a resource that is maybe on the razor's edge of not having regulations and having regulations, then you should probably practice catch and release. And the fact of the matter is, if you're fishing in a lot of places in our country, particularly here on the East Coast, where there has been significant industrialization and there's been mining and things like that, you might not want to be eating those fish anyway. But that being said, there's nothing morally wrong, and I'm saying that as a as a religious and personal conviction. There's nothing morally wrong with harvesting fish from time to time. I do so, and I enjoy it. It's not a lot of trout, but I do catch and kill some fish, or as some folks like to say, catch and release into hot bubbling grease. All right. So those are a couple of caveats I wanted to throw out there. But what does it mean to release fish well? And again, I'll try to keep things as basic as possible. But the first thing to think about to release fish well, it comes well before you've even made your cast. And here are a few of those things. One, have a good landing net. And a good landing net is going to do a few things. It is going to allow you to shorten the length of the fight, because if you're trying to play that fish to your hand, then you are going to fight it to a point of exhaustion a little bit further, which again increases the chance of it being stress or even mortality. So you have that. Secondly, if you get into a really big fish and you can't land it with your hand, the only way that you're going to be able to deal with that fish is to snap off your leader, which is not very satisfying, and it's also not great for the fish, or you have to beach it on rocks, which again is not good for the fish. So to have a good landing net matters. Now, I am not one of those people that carries a 4-foot long net, or even a net that's normal size but with a 3-foot handle. I have a traditional, normal, teardrop shaped trout net. And I think it works just fine. If I can't get a fish within my arm's length from my body, and with that extra 2 feet of net in front of me, then I have not fought the fish well enough. But the bag style matters. So definitely not the monofilament knotted style nets, not even the fabric nets. A nice rubber basket net is going to be better on the fish because it is not abrasive. And it's also going to not get hung up in trees as easily, and you're not going to get flies stuck on it. So when you are shopping for a net, or if you have an older net that you like and you want to keep, you can find nets that have a rubber bag. They're a little bit rigid at first. When I first got mine, I thought, this thing's going to stick out, a 1.5 foot, but it kind of softened down, especially as the weather gets warm and things like that. But they are great and they're good for the fish. So that's the first thing to think about. The second thing to think about as far as releasing fish well is to mash down your barbs. Now, I can say that I have lost more fish because of a barb than because I had a barbless hook. And I don't have numbers for that. I just have a feeling for it, that there's been times where I have not hooked fish well, or fish have come off, and it's because of, one, there's a barb on the hook, and it created more resistance going into that fish's mouth, or two, because that barb actually created a larger hole in a fish with a softer mouth, and it was able to come out easily, right? And again, I'm not there. I don't have a microphone. I don't have a microphone on the fish, but nor do I have a camera on the fish. But I am very confident that that's the case. I do not feel like, and I think the statistics bear this. I don't have anything in front of me, but I don't feel like, or nor do I'm very confident that a barbless hook reduces your chances of getting that fish to you. But what it does do is, one, it creates a smaller hole in that fish's mouth, and that's not the end all be all. But by doing so, you can remove that hook so much easier. Now, there's a side benefit to this. Not every fish you catch right in the jaw that is nice and firm. Sometimes you catch it in the roof of the mouth. Sometimes you catch it a little bit further back in the mouth, more towards the throat. Sometimes you foul hook a fish because the thing, just rises savagely. You are pulling back your fly to go into a back cast, and you just happen to be in the same place as a fish, or you're fishing a multi-fly rig, and a second fly hooks into that fish in its stomach or on its fin or on it or somewhere else on its body. And when those situations happen, then it's not so much about the fact that, well, you don't have a barbless hook and so you didn't make a big hole. It's now you can pull that hook out with your forceps or even with your fingers so much easier. So that is a second thing to think about releasing fish well, that comes long before you even make a cast. And of course, you don't have to buy barbless hooks. You can fish with the normal hooks that you have, the hooks you buy at the fly shop, and then just go ahead and smash it down. But when doing so, take your time, line things up well, hold your fly firmly, and get a good flat surface. A lot of pairs of hemostats today actually come with a little like platform somewhere past the head where you can cinch those barbs down. And again, I think that even just having that little bump of that extra material, that actually gives you a little bit of something that holds into that fish when it is twisting and turning and maybe even jumping. So those are two things to think about before you make your cast. Now, while you're fighting the fish, now you can significantly reduce fish mortality by fighting a fish quickly. Now, this is a skill. There is not a lot of super practical tips that I can give, except for you want to make sure you maintain significant tension on that fish. You want to make sure that you are directing it towards you and into a situation where it's not running downstream or not comfortable. Okay. So yes, to make sure that fish is comfortable in the long term, you want to make it uncomfortable in the short term. So you're pulling its head into the current. You are making it have to fight you and the current. You're not letting it go downstream. You're not letting it run for the sake of letting a fish run and having the joy of it running. You're using your drag well. You're making sure that drag, that tension on your reel is at a place either through the disc drag or the click system, or you're palming the reel, applying some pressure with the palm of your hand to the exposed spool of your reel so that fish is getting tired out quicker than it is getting worn out. All right, if that makes sense. I know it's a difference without a distinction or vice versa, but you don't want that fish to be exhausted. You're wanting it to want to be done fighting. All right. So all of that sort of stuff needs to be in your mind and be in your head as you're fighting these fish. Something else that really just comes with practice and experience is knowing how strong something like 4X actually is. I know a lot of people will let fish run because they're afraid that their 3X or their 4X or even their 5X is going to snap. This stuff is incredibly strong. Go ahead sometime, take a length of 5X fresh out of the spool, not something that's been sitting, coiled up on your reel for 6 or 8 months. Fresh out of the spool 5X, and just try to just snap it with the kind of tension applied by a trout. So just tugging on it, not, jerking it, but just consistent pressure with a little bit of throbbing going on. It's not super easy, even though that's, way less than 10-pound test. So don't be afraid to apply pressure on that fish. Pay attention to where its head is. Move its head in a way that its head is out of the current and towards you. Don't be afraid to move that rod tip from the left to the right, from your perspective, to move that fish into a position where it is having to fight you and the current, and it's also being steered towards your landing net. There's a lot more we could say about fighting fish, but I think that's definitely a necessary component of things that happen before you land the fish when it goes to releasing fish well. So now you've landed the fish. So you have it in your net. Hopefully your net is a good net with a good bag. What do? Well, you keep that fish underwater. That fish is not going to break your net. It's not going to break the bag of your net. It's not going to break the material of your net. You keep that fish in the water, and it may be thrashing around, but a fish thrashing in your net is better than a fish thrashing that you have yet to net, okay? And it's better than a fish that is thrashing in your hands that you're trying to release well. If it is at all possible, then you can simply grab that fly. If it's exposed, you can see it with your fingers, and assuming it's barbless and it's in the fish's mouth, you can just apply a little bit of pressure and pop it right out. And now if that fish is thrashing around, you just move that net so it spills and away it goes, right? If that fish is a fish that's not particularly large, there's a good chance you can even bring it towards you without even putting it in your net. You can reach down with your fingers or your forceps and grab that fly, give it a quick little flip, and out it comes. Now, at this point, it's worth mentioning there's other tools. There's quick release tools, which effectively, instead of having to aim for that fly, that you hook around your line, you follow your leader and your tippet down to that fly, and what it does is it creates a little kind of semicircle around your fly and apply some pressure on the bend of your hook, and you can just force it, and it forces itself out of that fish's mouth. Again, a barbless fly makes this much easier. But what you're looking to do is get this fish off of that hook as quick as possible. Now, you might be saying, what about pictures? I want pictures. Well, I think that the best looking fish pictures are very natural pictures. It's not the traditional grip and grin. Now, I'm not opposed to that. And if you go on Casting Across, you're going to see pictures of me holding fish. It happens. But it doesn't have to happen every time. I think one of the things that is most depressing in my humble opinion is when I'm on social media and I see somebody post 24 pictures, all of 14 and 12-inch fish that all look the same. Now that's exciting that you caught that many fish, and that's not a bad size fish, but use quality, not quantity. All right, and a bunch of pictures of a fish in a with net bag as the background is not necessarily the most exciting thing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take any pictures like that, because again, go on Casting Across. You'll see I've taken plenty of pictures like that. But again, use an economy in how you photograph the fish, because you're not going to sit there and look at 1,000 pictures of 1,000 fish, from 3 or 4 different angles. You're going to look at the good pictures and keep the good pictures and share the good pictures. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing is to keep the fish in the water. Now, I think some of the coolest pictures are pictures of a fish that is just under the water surface. I mean, that's how we are meant to appreciate fish, right? Or in our stomachs, but that's another conversation. So fish that are still in the water are fantastic pictures. So if you get your hand wet, or you get your hand wet and even better are grabbing that fish with the rubber of the net being the thing that's primarily touching it, you can hold it in a position still in the water. Water is going through its mouth, out its gills. You're not touching it with dry hands, and you can take plenty of pictures that way. But that doesn't mean, like I said, that you can't pick up a fish. Just be prepared. Do it quickly. Don't spend 15 minutes getting your camera and your tripod set up so that you can then go back to the fish that's now been kind of flopping around in your net, half out of the water, half in the water this whole time, simply for you to pick it up, take a picture, walk over to the camera holding the fish, make sure it looks good, and then do 15 more rapid shots, and then release the fish for it to simply swim off and die. Or it might do great. It might be completely revived, but it's still not the best thing for it. So use an economy in that. If you have captured the biggest fish of your life. Now, I remember one situation where I hooked into an absolutely massive steelhead. I mean, this hen was huge. And I want a picture of myself with it because it was simply the biggest fish I think I'd ever caught. And so I just kind of put my my little camera on a tree limb and set it for a timer, hit it, pick the thing up, snap, 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 and then put it down, let it sit for a minute, hit the button, snap, 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 let her go. They're not great pictures, but you know what? It's a picture of me holding a giant fish, and that's really all I wanted. You might say you could have done better, or you didn't have to do it at all, and both of those are completely acceptable opinions. But I found a kind of happy medium, and I did the best I could with that fish in the situation that I was in. But yeah, just keeping the fish in the water as much as possible. If you lift it up, do it very, very quickly and then put it back in. Make sure your hands are wet. Why? What's the scientific reason for this? Is it that it just makes fish happier? No. Fish have and this is a super unscientific way to talk about it, a protective slime coating on them. We know that fish are slimy, right? If you've ever kept a fish out of the water, they get almost sticky, especially if you're going to harvest it or something like that to eat later. They start to get sticky after a while. It's almost like a mucus coat. And you don't want to rub this off. There's plenty of pictures online of fish that people have caught that have, everything from discoloration to fungal infections on their bodies that are in the shape of human hands because they were grabbed by somebody. And we have all sorts of nasty stuff on us that is not intended to be on fish. And to be fair, vice versa. And so making your hands wet, it protects that slime coat, and it also provides a barrier in between you and that fish. I like to use that rubber-bodied net, the rubber net in between the fish's body and my hands as much as possible as well. It provides a little bit of grip, but it also makes it so that my hands aren't all over the fish's body. So what else can you do? We've moved past getting the fly out of the fish's mouth. We've moved past getting the picture of the fish if you feel like you need it. But again, more artistic pictures, I would say, are better than your face. Honestly, when I'm online, I want to see pictures of fish, not pictures of people, including myself. All right. What else can you do? Well, I think something that is definitely worth talking about is reviving fish. So there's times where you're going to play a fish, and because of your tippet size, because of where you caught that fish, because of just how the fight goes, it's going to be exhausted. And we've all had the experience of we catch a fish, we place it back on the water, and it goes belly up. Now, that doesn't mean it's curtains for that fish and you have to harvest it or you've killed it. It's not a good situation, but you can easily do a few things. And the first one is holding that fish in current. There's a chance that you've played that fish into more stagnant water or more still water. Wade out to where there's a little bit of current and hold that fish, again, with wet hands, maybe even using your landing net, in the current and moving it back and forth to help stimulate water going through its gills. It's amazing how a fish that was just kind of floating still and glassy for a few minutes will quickly just tail flip and go back into the current and be back to normal, almost like it's snapping out of some shell shock. This can actually be something where you can release a fish and you notice that it just kind of settles to the bottom or drifts back a little bit. And I don't think it's inappropriate to go and re-net that fish and take it into a current and allow it to kind of be rejuvenated in that spot, and then ensure that it swims away. Now, there's no way to guarantee you're going to revive every fish you catch, and if you do kill a fish, then you have to leave it in there if it is a catch and release stream. You don't get a pass because you killed this 18-inch fish on this catch and release fly fishing only stream, and the warden's not going to give you a pass on that. It's going to be for an otter, it's going to be for a snapping turtle, it's going to be for a heron. Okay, it's not for you. Sorry. But if you're fishing somewhere where you were on the fence and you did kill a fish, or you hooked it deep and you caused some significant bleeding when you were taking that hook out, then don't think twice about harvesting it, and think if you have this great moral objection to it, well, then do better next time, or realize that this is kind of the natural consequence of engaging in what is ultimately a blood sport, even if your preference is catch and release. So I know that's a lot of information, kind of a scatter shot of content to throw out there, but not all of these things are necessarily common sense. You do see a lot of pictures of people lipping trout, people of dragging fish onto the sandy bank to take pictures of it. It is definitely not on the right side of history. I don't like using that phrase, to post pictures of a trout covered in grass and dirt on social media. You don't hold a trout like a bass, nor do you put your fingers up in its gills if you plan on releasing it. There's some awesome pictures from, 40, 50, 60 years ago in black and white of people doing this. And part of it is we ate a lot more of the fish back then, but that's not how we're meant to hold them now. And also, you don't keep fish on a stringer just to throw them back in the water. Okay. Another thing, kind of on a corollary with that, if you put fish on a stringer, those are the fish you're taking home. Don't sub out fish if you are trying to catch your biggest limit. And again, this has nothing to do with catch and release. It's having to do with not releasing fish well. And a fish that's been hanging out on a stringer for a few hours is definitely not going to be released well. Although, I tell you what, there's some crappie that have been on stringer for hours. We go to fillet them, and they have just as much energy as they did when we brought them to the boat. But again, you can't use that as anecdotal evidence that these fish are going to be fine. It's definitely best practices to keep what you plan on keeping and throw back what you plan on throwing back. So I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff, and there's lots of resources out there. There are YouTube videos, there are organizations, there are websites, there are articles on all sorts of fly fishing resources that can give you more and more scientifically detailed information on what it means to release fish well. I would say that making sure your gear is right, both from your hooks, your landing net. If you have I think Catch and Release was one of the original versions of that little tool that you slide down your leader and knock that fly free. But things like that are important. Learning how to play fish well, learning how to trust your equipment and use your equipment to help get that fish in well, all of those things really matter and can really help keep those fish swimming to be caught again, to reproduce, and to give us and all of our fellow anglers lots and lots of enjoyment over the coming years. But again, something I totally missed, something I was unclear on, let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. I actively seek out your input for content, but also because I want to know what you think. Matthew at castingacross.com. This week on the podcast, let them touch bugs. There is one of my favorite pictures I've ever put on the website. It is a picture of 8 little boys looking at a tray full of aquatic macroinvertebrates. One of the things that I've done a number of times over the last 15 years has been kind of like not field trips, but like little exhibitions for children where I bring in macroinvertebrates. I've done it for private schools. I've done it for camps. I've done it for homeschool co-ops. And I bring in bugs that trout eat, and I talk about them, and I let the kids hold them. And, once you get the kids out from in front of a screen, a big old stonefly or a heligramite or a caddis poking its head out of its case, I mean, that's pretty fascinating stuff. So I talk a little bit about how you can do this. I mean, if you have a kid, you can do this. I guarantee you can. If you know what a bug looks like, caddisfly, stonefly, mayfly, first of all, it's easy to figure out. But then you can do this with them on the water, or you can bring it to them. So I talk about that in this article. And at the end of this episode, my recommendation this week is going to give you every tool you need to do it. Okay. The Wednesday's post is called "New Gear Can Be a Blast," and the photograph. It probably gets flagged in certain social media websites these days, is of my brand new shotgun. It is beautiful. It hasn't killed a bird yet, but I've only had it for a few days. It is a real beauty. And kind of riff on the idea that I'm going to have to kill a lot of birds to make up for the amount of money I spent on this thing. Now, if you know how much that shotgun costs, no, I did not spend retail. Never spend retail on a firearm. Just a bit of heads up. You can always find sales, and you can always find it much, much cheaper than MSRP. Anyway, but I talk about the same thing with fly rods. If especially if you're into catch and release, how many fish do you have to catch to make that fly rod purchase worthwhile? But that's not the only variable that you need to consider, and that's effectively what this article is about. So, New Year can be a blast. This week's recommendation on the podcast is a great little toolkit from the folks at Ascent Fly Fishing. It's called the River Oracle Streamside Match the Hatch Kit. River Oracle Streamside Match the Hatch Kit. And I've used this, especially when I've taken my kids and some of my friends' kids to the river to show them bugs. It has everything you need. It has a seine net that you can put over your fly fishing net to collect the insects. It has 6 little beakers to store insects in, which is great for showing them to the kids, but it's also great if you want to take them home and use them as patterns for tying your fly patterns to match what you have in your stream. And there's a couple other little tools in there, a little magnifying glass, a little measuring kit, things like that. But for the cost, it gives you everything you need to get out on the water, catch these bugs. There's also a thermometer, which is helpful because you're able to use that to figure out, okay, these bugs are in this place because it's warmer, cooler, whatever. And now you have a nice stream-side thermometer you can throw in your vest if you want to make sure you're fishing and taking care of the fish in that way too. But the River Oracle Streamside Match the Hatch kit from Ascent Fly Fishing is on this podcast's show notes page over at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast in iTunes. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.